PNC is proud to support the presentation of this City Club of Cleveland Friday Forum on WVIZ PBS.
Additional support comes from Cleveland State University. Support for closed caption transcripts of City Club forums is provided by the Nordson Corporation Foundation.
Welcome to the Friday Forum of the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Rick Taft, a past president of the club. This is the introductory session in a series of community events that celebrate a year of vitality between the Ohio Senior Olympics held in Cleveland this summer and the National Senior Games to be held next year. I have been chosen to help kick off the year as the before picture to show the need for a year of vitality in some of us who are in the not-so-young category. I look forward to the boost. Our speakers today, Cathy and Peter Whitehouse, need no boost. They are Cleveland's own dynamic duo. Though their title today has been announced as the Fountain of Youth Engaging the Brain, they have said they will not so much talk about this topic as exude it. Cathy and Peter met as graduate students in cognitive psychology at Johns Hopkins and eventually moved on to important collaborative work as the parents of 3 daughters, all of whom, by the way, have now grown up to continue to carry the torch of cognitive psychology in a variety of disciplines. Variety of disciplines is a key phrase for understanding the Whitehouse family. Peter is both a PhD and an MD and is a professor of neurology at Case Western Reserve University with a specialty in geriatric neurology, especially Alzheimer's and other challenges to the aging brain. But in his heart, he is not so specialized. He views himself broadly as a cognitive neuroscientist and a global bioethicist devoted to finding ways to integrative health. He is uncomfortable with the university model that has evolved in the West since the Enlightenment, every scholar in his or her niche. He believes in the logic of consilience. All knowledge is fully interconnected, and he loves to attack knowledge silos wherever he finds them. Cathy is a little simpler to type, but not much. She is grounded in developmental psychology, but she is an educator who has been drawn heart and soul into helping young people attain their potential in a way that sees learning as part of a lifelong intergenerational process. After years of listening to her long for a way to carry her ideas into practice, her husband and eldest daughter joined forces to convince her to start a school. The Intergenerational Schools, a free public charter school for grades K through 8, I think I've got that correct, here in Cleveland is the result. A thrilling, highly successful school that teaches students in learning stage compatible groups that include a 3 to 4 year age span. And the school draws on mentors, and readers of all ages, including my father. To celebrate the beginning of the year of vitality, it will give us all a boost to bring you Cathy and Peter Whitehouse, a wide-ranging pair of cognitive scientists who are deeply engaged in lifelong learning for themselves in every life they can touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, City Club, and happy birthday on 100 years of good work in the community. When we started the school that Cathy will be talking about later, we included in the mission statement spirited citizenship. And that's what this organization represents for this community, and that's what you and your family, Rick, represent for our community as well. So thank you. It was a real pleasure to get to know you a little bit last night when we were talking about your introduction. It's a pleasure to be part of the Year of Vitality and to thank the Cleveland Sports Commission, the Medical Mutual, Zimmer, and other people that are bringing this series to you. And all the Senior Olympics folks, the participants and others that'll be here, that are here this summer, and the National Games, as you heard, will be here next summer. A special thanks to Case Western Reserve University and University Hospitals for their presence here and for the opportunities that university and hospital have given us to create this story that we're about to share with you. And a special thanks to the School of Nursing and the Center for Aging and Health and the Department of Sociology, and I'm going to forget some people here if I'm not careful. But I wanted to highlight the Center for Aging and Health and the School of Nursing because as part of this Year of Vitality, on April the 12th at Landerhaven, there'll be a conference called Gray Matters, Healthy Mind, Healthy Body, Healthy Aging as part of the Seller Conference series that they're well known for. So do consider attending. Now, as Rick mentioned, we saw this title a few days ago, Fountain of Youth, and thought, whoa, that's a funny title. We're not sure it exists. We think Ponce de Leon failed to find it, which doesn't seem to stop hundreds of thousands of elderly in Florida driving around looking for it. But the question is, how could we address that topic? And I did promise my wife that I wouldn't be too funky about it. But I want to promise to you that at the end of the talk, I will show you the Fountain of Youth. And I will even do that to the people on radio, which is a little harder. So stay tuned. We're going to divide our talk into 4 segments. The first is I'm going to introduce a concept that was in our original title called intergenerativity. The rest of the title was lifelong learning and activity to promote vital aging. Cathy is then going to talk about the school that you've heard we've been a part of creating. And I will come back on the stage, if you will. I'm not actually going to leave, but to talk about some future directions that we're trying to take with the school. And then we get to the 4th part of this, which is the question and answer session, which is the part that I offered to Jim. We just jump right to, but he wanted us to say a few words first. So that's what we have planned. The concept of intergenerativity is a strange one. Google keeps trying to tell me, do you mean intergenerational? And it is intergenerational in the sense that you can find intergenerativity wherever you find positive energy in a community or in a people or whatever, and try to connect them. It's a blend of innovation and integration. It's a focus on connections and relationships. And it is a form of practice that depends heavily on metaphor and stories. Metaphors blend 2 areas of human endeavor together to try to create something new. And it is through stories that we hope to create and share those efforts at intergenerativity. To illustrate, for those of you that are mathematicians, I'll quote a Sufi proverb. You think that because you understand 1, you understand 2, because 1 and 1 make 2. But you must understand and. For those of you that see the parallels between math and music, let me say we're going to be talking in a musical term, not about the melody, but about the harmony. So that's a little bit about the concept of intergenerativity. Let me just talk about it in relationship to some specific examples, and let me start with Cathy and I. We're both psychologists, as you heard, but Cathy is a developmental psychologist, and I'm a geriatric neurologist. So in the relationship that we had, that came to produce with others in the community, the concept of the intergenerational school, there were these differences. There's another difference between Cathy and I, which I think is intergenerative, that I characterize, with her permission, as the co-equal chief operating officer and chief executive officer. It may become, I guess I could identify that the more outward-looking extrovert, me, the chief executive officer, works hand in hand with the detail-oriented, focused chief operating officer, and that's part of what the partnership that we have created, I think, is based upon. So that we're intergenerative in our own relationship. I need a bigger voice. So let me, since I'm a brain scientist, give you another illustration that actually builds on that notion of the difference in complementary nature of the intergenerativity between operating officers and executive officers with a brain story. And that's the story of inter-hemispheric differences. You're all aware we have a left brain and we have a right brain. And I don't want to make a complicated topic too simple, but the generative connections between the left and the right are critical. The left tends to be logical, linear, focused on the task, rule-oriented, focusing on stability. Well, you don't have, that's the chief operating officer. The right hemisphere, now I get lost in Shaker Heights, I've lived there for 25 years, but spatial, emotional, broad attention, fascinated about change, and the hemisphere in which metaphor perhaps is most realized, indicating it's not a simple language, non-language issue, it's an issue of how do those hemispheres collaborate around the creative process that leads to intergenerativity. Now let me give you one example of what intergenerativity is not before I turn the podium over to the chief operating officer who's watching the time more carefully than I am, I'm sure. And it's a field that I have devoted some of my life to, which is the field of Alzheimer's. This is not an intergenerative field. It is a field that is based on fear, not on looking for positive sources of generativity. It is a real phenomena that older people suffer from memory problems. We know that from our personal experiences. But it is a field, the story is dominated by a scientific model that says the way to address this social challenge of brain aging that we call Alzheimer's is a scientific methodology. Why would I challenge that story? Because we are increasingly recognizing the word Alzheimer's disease as a singular noun is probably wrong. Many conditions fall under that rubric of Alzheimer's. Moreover, it is related to aging to one degree or another. There isn't anybody in this room that would not recognize there are some changes that are happening to their brains as they age. Hopefully minor ones, but for some of you not. The question is, shall we wait and see this as a scientific problem to be fixed, or shall we see this as something that requires a broader social response? And at university hospitals, and my chairman, whose chair is not occupied because a crisis came up, has been very supportive, as has the School of Nursing, represented here by their faculty and by their Dean, Mary Kerr, of taking a broader conception of brain health. We address the challenges that we call Alzheimer's disease now through a broader social response. And this is our version of brain health, and this is a vision that is being implemented, as you'll be hearing from now, from Cathy, as she talks about the intergenerational school generally, but how elders with cognitive impairment, with what we might have called Alzheimer's disease, participate in that community of learners.
Thank you. So I'd like to introduce you to the school in a more personal way and help you get to know some of the members of our multi-generational community at what I'll call TIS, the Intergenerational School. So first, TIS is, as you heard, a free public charter school. And we predominantly serve families on the east side of Cleveland. TIS was one of 3 high-performing charter schools in Cleveland that came together in a collaborative way and started the organization called Breakthrough Charter Schools, which is now a network of high-performing charter schools offering good school options to our families. We are non-selective in admission, and about 90% of our students at TIS are African American, with about 70% qualifying for free and reduced meals. And we are about to open, next Thursday in fact, our 13th year of operation. We do anticipate, although ODE can always do some crazy things that you don't expect, but we do anticipate next month that we will receive our 9th excellent rating out of 10 years of being rated. Those ratings are based on our students' performance on the Ohio Achievement Assessments, which are the same tests that all public school students in Ohio are required to take. A couple of years ago, we were extremely honored to be approached by some families from the near west Ohio City area of Cleveland who asked if we would be able to start a school in their community. And this was such a privilege for us. And what they communicated to us was that, they loved living in Ohio City, but what they saw was, as young families' children got older and approached school age, they all moved to the suburbs. And this group of families said, we don't want to move out to the suburbs. We want a school that we feel comfortable sending our children to. So Near West Intergenerational School opened last year and has completed a wonderful first year, and is the first charter school in Ohio to be sharing a building with a district school. They're sharing the building with Garrett Morgan School of Science. And this has not only been a successful co-location, it has been a very successful collaboration led by the principals and teachers of those two schools and supported by the visionary leadership of Eric Gordon at CMSD. TIS is housed at the Fairhill Center, but we are excitedly hoping to move next year into the being redeveloped St. Luke's Hospital. That is a project of redeveloping that historic community resource into independent living apartments for seniors. And the third wing, 3 floors of the third wing, we hope, will be the new home of TIS. And I'll just say we are currently in a major capital campaign to help that happen, so feel free to help us out if you so desire. And with seniors actually living there, I just already, my mind is exploding with the possibilities of engaging them in the life of the school. So TIS represents a bold experiment in educational innovation. As you heard, we reject what we consider a lockstep, factory model, age-segregated, grade-level learning structure. Instead, we believe that learning groups, and this sounds so obvious, should be based on what you already know and what you're ready to learn next. We believe that you should move on to more difficult topics once you've mastered the easier ones. We believe that we should give learners the time and the teaching they need so that all can be successful. We believe, as Peter said, learning is a lifelong process, and it's enhanced through social engagement with others who contribute different experiences and perspectives. And we especially believe that powerful, authentic, generative learning occurs when people, children and adults of different ages, participate together. So when we first opened, we had just 30 students, and we decided immediately that reading was our first focus. I was shocked when I found that third grade reading test scores are used to plan the number of prison cells that are going to be needed down the road. And so teaching children to read seemed urgent. And I firmly believed that the best way to teach children to be readers was to have them spend lots of time with wonderful, beautiful books and someone to read to and with. And so our first intergenerational program was Reading Mentors. So let's meet one of those mentors from that first year who 12 years later is still coming back every week to read with students. He comes back every week to read and converse, although now that we have middle school age students, it's actually to argue and debate more than to read and converse. Mr. Goodman is grandpa to everyone, including staff and students. And he told me the story of how he ended up coming to TIS. So he had retired. Finally, he had retired. And his buddies were so happy that, now he's retired with them. And they're all just eager to get into retirement. And he said to them, okay, what do we do? And they said, well, we go down to the deli and we'll have some breakfast and then we'll sit and talk for a few hours. I thought, okay. So they go down to the deli to do that. And then he says, okay, now what do we do? Well, we're going to go to the food court at the mall, and we'll get something to eat, and then we're going to sit there and talk for a few hours. And he says to me, and telling me this story, and I thought, well, that's enough of this baloney. I heard there was a school at Fair Hill Center. I'm going to go check that out. And he's been a reading mentor ever since. And I could give you a long list of students whose success was fostered by the steady, authentic, teasing, and always loving wisdom of Mr. Goodman. And Mr. Goodman learned too. My favorite example of that is just before his hip replacement surgery, the teacher of the class that he mentored found that using a smartboard, you could do virtual hip surgery. And so he came in, the kids and Mr. Goodman did the little hip surgery where your finger, you do the scalpel, and it shows you exactly what's going to happen. And he said to me, I'm not so sure I want to go through with this anymore. But it was just a great, fun experience for him. I'd like to also introduce you to our kind and gentle Mrs. Kelsey, who was also a reading mentor in the last 4 years of her life. We lost Mrs. Kelsey last year. She had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she could not remember the hours that she spent patiently reading to and listening to children, helping them with words, explaining pictures, telling them about the ideas of the books. In fact, when she was given the Volunteer of the Year award, she turned to her daughter and asked why she was getting this award. And her daughter explained, because you come to the school, and she came like 3 times a week, you come to the school and read with the children. And she turned to her daughter and said, I do, in astonishment. So even though she didn't remember us from day to day, when she was there with children, she was fully there, fully engaged, clearly enjoying that interaction, and she has left a great legacy to the children that she worked with. And last year's Volunteer of the Year is Mr. Robbins, who became our first math mentor. Math was his passion, and he wanted to share that with students. He's often at TIS after school, helping his mentees with homework. And I started to notice that, and usually our mentoring is one-on-one, but I started to notice that more and more students were flocking to this math homework. And conversations were getting pretty lively. I could hear, voices chattering away. And being the principal, I thought I better stop in and see how off task Mr. Robbins and his mentees are, only to find that their discussions were completely about math. So not only is Mr. Robinson apparently the Pied Piper of math at TIS, he also has shared his other love, his hobby of knitting, with these boys, which I think is tremendous. So we've now grown to 224 young learners, and last year had almost 300 adult and older adult participants at the school. Our older learners include high school students, university students, including those from Case Western Reserve University, and especially our long-term partnership with the School of Nursing, John Carroll, CSU, community volunteers, and long-term care facility residents Judson, McGregor, and other care facilities here in Cleveland that our students partner with. So our test scores tell us that the children are benefiting from all of this. And we also can tell you that both anecdotal evidence and a small study, one of those randomized control group type studies, shows that there are also benefits to the older folks who volunteer. But I can tell you we don't need a study to tell us that when someone keeps volunteering for 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, every week they keep coming, they recruit their friends, they tell us, I get more out of this than the children. That's all the evidence I need to know that that's something good to do. In a time when schools seem to sometimes be places of chaos, TLS is a calm, peaceful, nurturing place of learning. The continual presence of our older volunteers contributes to that atmosphere. In a time when generations are disconnected from and leery of one another, TLS is a place where the generations really get to know and care about one another. And this learning is profound and permanent. So I'll tell you one final story. Our graduating students last year, their senior trip, their final trip, was to go to Toronto. And many had never been out of Ohio. They'd barely been out of Cleveland. I don't think any had ever been out of the country. So this is like a really big deal. You know, we have to cross the border and all this stuff. And they were entranced with the diversity and the hugeness and the bustle that is Toronto. So they were indeed on unfamiliar territory. And along with Peter and myself, they visited Baycrest Hospital there and the affiliated assisted living facility, and we had a planned intergenerational activity. But our students walked into the room, and at each table there were 2 or 3 residents, and a student walked in and sat down alone with 2 or 3 of the residents. So here we have our African American children from Cleveland first meeting a group of Jewish elders. And although we had planned some specific ways to start this and facilitate these conversations, they just immediately started talking. And they talked, and Mr. McGarvey, who accompanied us, our intergenerational coordinator, they talked and talked and talked. We felt bad interrupting this to do the activity that we'd planned. And at the end of our time together, you know, it was hard to get them to stop talking, but we asked if they had any reflections. And the residents reflected on how poised, how well-spoken, how interesting, how knowledgeable, and how just plain smart my TS kids were. That is not in the state curriculum. But I have to say, I fully agreed with them. So before Peter takes us into some future directions, I'll ask you to imagine how different schools, school outcomes, and the lives of children could be if every school welcomed an army of older adult volunteers to read, solve math problems, debate current events, garden, and even ballroom dance, one of the intergenerational activities we've done, or to spend time just talking to one another. And I'll ask you to imagine how different the lives of our elders could be if they had ample opportunities to engage in sharing their wisdom, life experiences, hobbies, and interests with a generation that will be their legacy. Thank you. Peter.
So let's continue this imagination by thinking about the future a bit. What can we build on in this school? The focus here is on the word intergenerativity, bringing things together, as I talked about in my initial comments. So one thing that we're doing is interprofessional. We're developing a medical health nursing, social work, psychology practice at the intergenerational school, working with the National Assembly of School-Based Healthcare and the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing. In other words, this is a clinic that's going to be school-based, that's going to blend education and health. And it's going to blend private and public health. So it represents a new form of healthcare, which I think is not particularly well represented in Cleveland, although nationally there are a fair number of these school-based clinics. Let's talk about international for a minute. I am actually living in that assisted living facility that the kids visited because I'm a visiting innovator, strategic innovator at that hospital in Toronto. And we are working to try to blend the intergenerational learning throughout the Ontario public school system. We already have a sister school in Japan. We've talked to the Board of Education in Finland, which has a good public school system. So we really are interested in the generality of this, and it's just easier to drive to Toronto than any other international collaboration. And by the way, when I started living there a few weeks ago, they still remember the visit of those schools to that facility and the poise of the students that Cathy said. Another inter is the internet. We have a school in virtual reality. Our kids constructed a school, and they focused on building the edible forest garden first. We have a garden attached to the school that we believe is a very important part for intergenerational learning, a very important place to learn about the personal and public health value of local foods, for example. We have a project using the Microsoft Kinect, which some of you may know is a next version of Nintendo exercise game that actually can be connected on the internet, although isn't currently. Because I should have emphasized as a neurologist that if you want to keep your brain healthy, using your mind by coming to the City Club is clearly an excellent way to do it. But I would suggest you jog home or bicycle home or add some physical exercise to it because physical exercise is so important. And we're doing that with our exercise, our grant looking at exercise. And finally, I want to end with one last story, and that has to do with an interdisciplinary look at the whole topic of sustainability. That is to say, our responsibility for future generations to leave them with the resources that they can use in their own time and pass on further into the future. It is, to me, a fundamentally intergenerational ethical issue. And we have been working with the Cleveland Sustainability 2019 initiative. We were pioneers with others starting the Cleveland Educators for Sustainability because I think learning about nature and thinking systemically about how we're connected to things is a very important task for public education and for all of us. We did one particular project, and I'm going to hold up the book and describe it for those you out in Radioland. This is called The Legacy of the Clark Freeway Fighters, and the front cover of this book is an image of the reflection of the Doane Brook, which is the watershed that our university, that our hospital, that my house and our school is on. And this project was kids in our school interviewing elders in the community, Judson, Spartan Living, and elsewhere, about their role in 1962. When another corrupt Cuyahoga College politician that eventually went to jail, Albert Porter, tried to put 490 right through Shaker Heights, the Clark Freeway. It would have destroyed homes, it would have disrupted the water system, and it would have created havoc with the opportunity to create the wonderful Shaker Nature Center that we visit. Amongst the people interviewed was Kay Fuller, who has a mild memory problem. And so the kids were able to appreciate in this interactive conversation that people have a responsibility for contributing to community, and through stories, the legacy of the Clark Freeway Fighters can be maintained. So I want to thank the Nature Center for collaborating with this. They're celebrating their 44th birthday. Our city, Shaker Heights, is celebrating their 100th anniversary. And of course, I'll end by thanking the City Club again and celebrating their birthday. However, I remembered that I owed you a promise. I was going to show you the fountain of youth. So let's just use our imagination rather quickly here and close our eyes. We're only going to do that so we're on equal terms with those people in radio who can't see what's going on either. So close your eyes for just a minute, if you wouldn't mind. And imagine your favorite body of water in childhood. It can be whatever you want. It can be an ocean, it can be a lake, it can be a brook. And just imagine what stories you might tell about that relationship that you had with that body of water. And take that vision forward, because that's what we're about in this segment. What can you do to share your experiences with the next generations about that body of water? Feel the sense of responsibility as a member of community and how that connects to your own personal life purpose. Because this is what this project was all about. And I would argue for you that this sense of intergenerativity, this sense that this is a fountain of, well, maybe not youth, but youthful vitality, because you can be youthful in your vitality throughout your aging. Or perhaps, as Betty Friedan said, it's the fountain of age. Or perhaps, better put, it's the fountain of aging. It's the blessings and the challenges that come with life, and that as you're older you can reflect on and offer that as a gift to future generations. So thank you.
Can I open my eyes? Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a Friday forum featuring Cathy and Dr. Peter Whitehouse. We will return to our speakers momentarily for our traditional City Club questions and answers. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speakers now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here and those listening to WCPN 90.3, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country that broadcast the forum. Our television broadcast partners are WVIZ PBS, IdeaStream. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. We welcome guests today at tables hosted by Baker and Hostetler, Case Western Reserve University, and the Western Reserve Agency, Area Agency on Aging. Today's forum is the annual David Warshawski Sr. Memorial Forum. This is made possible by a generous gift from David's widow, Florence Warshawski. Joining us today at the head table are several generations of the Warshawski family. Daughter-in-law Lee, grandchildren Kitty and Jacob, and 4 great-grandchildren. Will you please stand to be recognized? Today's program is presented in partnership with the Year of Vitality, a year of community events in and around Cleveland that take place between the 2012 Ohio Senior Olympics and leading up to the 2013 Summer National Senior Games. Now we would like to return to our speakers for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphone today is City Club Program Director Carrie Miller. First program, please.
First question. For the last 10 years, I've been involved in various senior activities at Fair Hill, so I've enjoyed watching your school. You've talked about reading. We had a chance for a wonderful magnet high school, the aircraft high school. It failed because we couldn't find motivated children who could read at the 9th grade level, and so they couldn't read the manuals, which is really sad. My real challenge is I know many people who in an unorganized fashion are mentoring throughout the school systems. Is there some way that we can help them to do a better job?
One thing I would say is that often mentoring is replaced by tutoring. And in my mind, they're very different. Tutoring is, again, something that's being done to the child. In mentoring, the child and the mentor are equal partners in that relationship, and that makes it very powerful. So when the younger individual has choice and power, they're much more, you don't have to force them to do this. They love to do this. They can't wait for time with their mentors. So I think that would be one aspect of it. I also think that sometimes those programs are seen as an add-on. Like, here's the school day, I'm the teacher, I'm doing everything that's important, and you're just somewhere out in the hallway. But I think a key to success is that it becomes systemic in the school. I mean, our programs are not just something else that we do, because then teachers get very crazy, oh, something else to do. These are integral, systemic, key, core aspects of what we do at the school. So it's a mindset change on the part of the educational institution to welcome this. It doesn't take away learning time. It just enhances the learning time. And it's very sad to me that we would ever have a 9th grade student who couldn't read, because if you pay attention and give them time and teaching when they're young, and give them the extra support that mentors can bring, you will never have a 9th grade student who can't read. So our students at our middle school level, they pass their Ohio assessments, 100% of them pass. No child at 9th grade level should ever not be able to read.
2 questions. How do you choose your teachers, and what has happened to the seniors who graduated?
Okay. Oh, great questions. My teachers, I'm looking for people who are smart, demonstrate that they are lifelong learners, and are eager to learn as educators. So we have a lot more success with new teachers than with teachers who have been teaching quite a while, who already know this is the way I do it, because it's hard for them to sometimes make the transition to, well, this is the way we do it. So, so young, exuberant, teachers who are just eager. And they have to believe that the intergenerational part of what we do is as important, or sometimes more important, than what they'll be doing in the classroom. We've been very pleased to partner with Ursuline on an apprentice teacher training program where their students spend an entire year not only getting their teaching license, but that entire year is spent at the school training at the same time. So that's been awesome. We've hired many students from that program. And our graduates, we're very proud of our graduates. Our goal is that every student who graduates from TIS goes to a top quality high school. And they have gone to, and Mr. McGarvey, you can help me out if I forget any. Many of our students have gone to one of the John Hay high schools, so we have students at all 3, science and medicine, architecture and design, and early college. St. Martin de Porres High School, with their apprentice type of program, is very compatible with our philosophy, so we have students there. We have a student at Hawken on an almost full scholarship, and last year we had a student who was accepted at Laurel on a complete full scholarship, so that was wonderful. And so they have all gone to STEM schools. The STEM high schools are another place that some of our students have gone. Mr. McGarvey, did I forget any that I should? Benedictine, oh, right. Benedictine, St. Ignatius, St. Ed's, and Trinity, I think. And we do, through Breakthrough, also have an active program of keeping track with those students in high school. We're very pleased because the parents give permission for us to get their high school grades so that we can find out, are there ways in which they weren't well prepared, so we can continue to improve what we're doing. Thank you.
The Supreme Court of the United States has recently declared the Affordable Health Care Law constitutional, the so-called Obamacare. As a result, there will literally be millions of people who've never before had health coverage now having an insurance that covers all their health needs. Many of these people will probably suffer from the very kind of conditions that you, Dr. Whitehouse, have described, whether it's memory loss or Alzheimer's or whatever. And the question I have is, to what extent you feel that the healthcare providers in the United States are adequate in number and in scope to be able to take care of this avalanche of new potential patients, and what suggestion do you have for expanding that list of providers?
I think the Affordable Health Care Act, in my opinion, is a step in the right direction. It addresses access and the challenges that increased access bring. Eventually, we have to reorient our priorities to make sure that we have the resources to pay for the things that really are beneficial to health. As a physician who practices in a hospital, I can tell you that I think we have a lot of work to do to reevaluate our addiction with technology, our addiction to medications, our false expectations that I alluded to in my talk, that we can fix complex issues like Alzheimer's disease with pills. But I think the issue of health professionals is a critical one. And we've been hearing the doctors say, well, there aren't enough primary care doctors, for example. And I'm going to get to nurses in a minute because I think that's a very important thing. I think it's a tragedy that we have not, as a profession, risen to the occasion to generate an enthusiasm for primary care. I sometimes say if I had to do it over again, I'd come back as a primary care healthcare provider, maybe a nurse. So addressing the type of doctor is only one part of it. Addressing the role of nurses and others, like social workers, is another key part of it. We've got to, in my view, align the economic priorities with the kinds of professionals we want. We've got to stop paying the people that do technologies more, and the people that are out in the community pay them less and pay the people in the community more. Finally, I think we also have to empower each of us through models of health coaching, through models of self-empowerment and self-efficacy, things that Shirley Moore, who's one of our faculty collaborators, studies, to take some more responsibility for their own health, not only as individuals, but as members of community. Because frankly, if we want to take on the challenge of obesity and diabetes and hypertension, that can come through health coaching. It can come through individuals, but it's also going to come through transforming our communities to make it easier for people to walk and cycle. And let's celebrate the recent additions to the cycle pathways here in Cleveland. And I'm sure Jim can tell you the ways to get back to where you are by taking public transportation and walking from the City Club as well, as I kind of was joking about before. But those are the things that are going to really promote health. And that's what's going to be the next stage now that we've started with the Affordable Health Care Act, in my opinion.
Good afternoon. I have a question from someone who's been following this discussion on Twitter. They say many school settings are struggling with parental involvement. What's TIS's secret for keeping parents engaged?
Well, one secret is not so secret. As a school of choice, parents choose us. So we start with that level of engagement from parents. And then we need to have many, many, many avenues to make it easy and welcoming for parents to be engaged. We have to accept the fact that some of our parents did not have good experiences in school themselves. They have, emotional thoughts about school, and so making it a very welcoming place helps that. I would also say that, not all of our parents are as engaged as we would like them to be. But you can't let that stop you from giving children what they need, even if it's not coming from the parent. And most of our parents are amazing, but we have the same range of parents. And that's where the intergenerational programming brings more supportive, caring, steady adults into the lives of our children. No one ever it was never detrimental to have another adult who paid attention to you and loved you and supported you. So you can make up for sometimes parents who can't be as involved as even they would like to be by bringing other adults into that learning environment as well.
You touched on it briefly in the last question, but I wonder if you can talk about the physical activities, which seem to be helpful towards both the elderly part of your program and also the students. What sort of things can you do in terms of physical activity? Do they have specific, periods of activity during their day? How do you address that need?
Let me talk about it as a general issue, and Cathy can talk about it programmatically. We're very pleased that we have a full-time gym teacher at the school, Mr. Smith, but there was a big conference in Vancouver on Alzheimer's disease. Let me focus on brain health for a minute. And unfortunately, a lot of the drug studies failed, but there was a huge emphasis on exercise to promote brain function. And for those of you that believe in things like brain imaging and growth factors, this exercise not only helps people with memory problems now, but helps people prevent having memory problems in the future, so it's both prevention and treatment. And it does so through mechanisms that we can imagine are pretty profound in terms of brain function, like producing more things like nerve growth factor and so on. So the scientific evidence on exercise from a brain perspective is getting stronger and stronger. And so that's why we have really been ramping up, if you will, our engagement with that side of brain health in the school.
And there are many ways that we can envision these physical activities being shared. For example, in our planning for St. Luke's, we're envisioning an intergenerational playground. And there are such things in Japan and in other places where children and adults, usually the adult takes the child and they sit down and watch. But there are ways that the adult can participate as well. The Connect game that Peter talked about. I mean, this is miraculous to see, because you get this thing set up, and on the screen, you're really projecting one person from the room full of kids and people, but the kids all think it's them. Everyone thinks it's them. So, they're moving in a totally wrong direction from the dance or whatever, but they think that's me out there. Ballroom dancing. I mean, that was such a wonderful program to do intergenerationally. We had a grandmother doing ballroom dancing with her grandson at the school. So what we've found over the years is there is no end. Like, everything you do, you can do intergenerationally, including the physical activity side of things.
And I'd like to put a plug in for dance, where we have very different styles. We're still working on that part of the
more than you know.
But I just joined the board of the Dance Exchange, which is in Washington, Liz Lerman, who got the MacArthur Prize, because that's an intergenerational dance company. I think that dance, frankly, is probably about the closest to perfect intervention, because it's not only the power of physical exercise, the power of music, which is profound in the brain, the power of doing it together, and the power of it being a cognitive challenge for some of us more than others.
The creative and non-traditional aspect of your school, I think, might give you a good perspective on the uniform testing requirements of No Child Left Behind, and so I'm interested in your opinion and reaction to those.
Oh, yes. Well, I don't think anything particularly good has come out of that. But I think one thing that's very damaging that has come out of that is the thought that we should get higher test scores by doing nothing but practicing for the test. And so many schools have become just test-taking mills of a lot of rote learning. And I hope that, because I would never run a school like that. I mean, I'd just quit and close the school if we had to be doing it that way. But I hope what we're able to show as a model is that you don't have to resort to that. That you can offer a very rich, engaging, environment filled with books and writing and thinking and conversation, and your students will then become readers, writers, mathematical thinkers, scientists. And frankly, if you do that and you add a little bit of test prep to get them familiar with this testing format, you don't have to worry so much about the tests. So it's been a very negative impact on education, and we try to just go around it. You know, we have to take the tests, but children learn better when they're engaged in real learning, authentic learning experiences with other people, and then the tests, to a more greater extent, will take care of themselves.
We believe in more authentic measures. One measure we're tracking carefully is how many members of our graduates become members of the City Club, for example.
Today at the City Club, we've been listening to a Friday forum featuring Dr. Peter Whitehouse and Cathy Whitehouse, exuding the fountain of youth, engaging the brain. Thank you, Dr. Whitehouse, Mrs. Whitehouse. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
PNC is proud to support the presentation of this City Club of Cleveland Friday Forum on WVIZ PBS.
Additional support comes from Cleveland State University. Support for closed caption transcripts of City Club forums is provided by the Nordson Corporation Foundation.